the psalmist said in Psalm 104 verse 24, "O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your possessions." Hello children. So at this point, we've gone through two of our eras in the timeline of the development of life. The Proterozoic era, which had one period, and the Paleozoic era, which had 6 periods. Now we're moving on to the Mesozoic era, which means the age of middle life. In this era, we had 3 periods, and the first period began around 220 million years ago. We're now going to go into a deep study of each of the periods of the Mesozoic era, the Triassic period, the Jurassic period, and the Cretaceous period. The first period of the Mesozoic era is the Triassic period. This period began about 220 million years ago and marked the beginning of a new era, the Mesozoic era, meaning middle life. This period is named after the peculiar 3-layer formation of the rocks at this time. The ancient supercontinent had existed for millions of years but was now in the process of breaking apart. Land movements that had begun at the end of the Permian period had now created 3 new continents. Volcanic eruptions continue to occur, especially along what is today the eastern coast of North America. The hot, dry climate forced the extinction of many amphibians during the Triassic period. Strangely, as reptiles were just adapting well to life on land, some reverted to the sea. Conifers became abundant during this period, along with the Cycadioidae, or cycads for short. Conifers spread everywhere on the plateaus. Plentiful remains of these trees have been found on the petrified forests of Arizona. Ferns and scurrying rushes spread on the lowlands closer to lakes and rivers. The maidenhair tree, also known as ginkgo, began to develop at the beginning of the Triassic period. This softwood tree has survived practically unchanged to the present. Arion was the first lobster-like arthropod. This Arion was the first lobster-like arthropod to appear. It was 4 inches wide as well as long and shed its shells as it grew larger. Ammonites and cephalopods that most probably descended from straight-shelled nautiloids or Ordovician times. Ammonites was the name given to a special group of these cephalopods whose fossil shells were curled like a ram's horns. Look at the shells, just like ram's horn, the Ammonites. The word Ammonites means stone of Ammon, referring to the Egyptian god Ammon, who was sometimes symbolized by the horns of a ram. The shells of these animals grew increasingly elaborate and varied. Most Ammonites could completely withdraw and close themselves inside their shells. Some were crawlers, others were swimmers. Ammonites lived in seas ranging from 30 to 120 feet in depth and avoided shallow waters where dinosaurs bathed. Instead of growing more and more elaborate shells like the Ammonites, another group of cephalopods was making its shell smaller and smaller until its mantle completely covered it. These relatives of the Ammonites were called the Belluminoids here. Fossil records show that these animals were plentiful in the Triassic seas. They looked like the squids and probably acted like their modern counterparts. Their 10 arms here had hooks to help them catch small fish, crabs, or perhaps even other Belluminoids. Without external shells to weigh them down, these creatures were the fastest swimming cephalopods. By taking in water and expelling it forcefully from their funnels, they could shoot forward or backward at top speed. Apparently, this sudden spurt of movement resulted in collisions, as their fossil shells show many fractures and dislocations. That is why we tell children not to run too much so you don't have fractures and dislocations like the Belluminoids. The Spandalus was a sea reptile that measured 24 feet in length. Although a reptile, it looked so much like a fish that it was called a ichthyosaur, which means fish lizard. Fossil remains have been found in which these reptiles were so completely preserved that scientists could actually determine the color and texture of the skin. Spandalus had a long, slender body with a fin-like slippers and a strong tail. This tail was very strong. It swam swiftly through the water and periodically surfaced to take in air with its lungs. Its smooth, sail-less skin was darkly colored above and lighter below, like that of a shark. With unusually large eyes equipped to take in the maximum light, these creatures hunted fish, squids, and Belluminoids, the remains of which also were preserved inside the fossilized skeletons. Even the skeletons of unborn babies were found inside their mothers' remains. Unlike other reptiles that laid their eggs on land, these creatures probably hatched their eggs internally. The Perganoquilos was a well-developed 12-inch turtle that lived in the water. Discovered in Germany, it was the first vertebrate of its kind, although it was not a primitive species. Ancestors of this animal have still not been found. Through evolution, Perganoquilos had lost its teeth and a horn beak replaced them. These reptiles carried their shell homes around with them. Since early turtles could not yet hide themselves inside their shells, the head and tail were protected by sharp spines. The legs also were safeguarded by the razor-sharp edges of his bony plated shell. Here. Most of these reptiles took to life in the water to help support the weight of their heavy armor. Consequently, turtles were found in all bodies of waters, lakes, streams, rivers, and seas. These vertebrates have survived to the present and have the longest lifespan of any animal in the animal kingdom. The fossil records of dinosaurs were first found in Triassic times. The term dinosaur or terrible lizard is somewhat misleading. It suggests that all of these reptiles were huge, savage, meat-eating beasts. While it is true that some dinosaurs actually weighed 40 to 50 tons, many others were very tiny and no larger than a present-day rooster, like your chickens. Furthermore, plant-eating dinosaurs were far more prevalent than carnivores. It is convenient, however, to use a general term that includes all of these fascinating creatures that once ruled the earth. The first dinosaurs were called thecodonts, which means socket teeth. From these common ancestors, two distinct branches of reptiles evolved, the difference being basically in the structure of the hip bones. Ornithischians, bird hips, had hip bones like those of a bird, while Saurians, the lizard hips, retained the same skeletal structure as the first thecodonts. A bird hip dinosaur, called the Ornithosuchus, measured 6 feet in length. It had long, slender limbs. Look at it. Very tiny limbs. And a sturdy tail for balance as it stood upright. Its feet were like those of a big bird with a large toe in the middle and two smaller ones on the side. Fossil footprints of these creatures were at first thought to be those of a large bird. A meat eater and a fast runner on two legs, it probably chased after smaller plant-eating animals or the young of larger dinosaurs. Ornithosuchus was one of the first of a long chain of dinosaurs that dominated life throughout the entire Mesozoic era. Complete skeletons of reptiles like Plateosaurus, here, the Plateosaurus, have been discovered in Germany, France, and Argentina. These lizard-hipped dinosaurs grew to be 21 feet in length, most of which was made up of long neck and tail. Look at the neck, look at the tail. The body is just here, but the tail is long, the neck is also long. The head was small with blunt teeth suitable for chewing plants. This vertebrate lived in swampy lowlands where lush vegetation provided an abundant food supply. Plateosaurus was the ancestor of a group of dinosaurs called sauropods, which means animals that walked on 4 legs. Though it usually walked on all fours, it could walk on its hind legs alone for short distances. The fossilized remains of Carnomyria were found in Russia, South Africa, and Australia. This reptile had a large heavy head which was knobby and an unusual pineal body or crude eye, just like shaped like a pine. A relative of Dimetrodon, Canamyra's tank-like body grew to approximately 6 feet in length. So we have studied the Triassic period, the dinosaurs that existed, and different reptiles that existed during this time. Our next class will be looking at the Jurassic period.